You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast.
I wanted to ask you too about a similar question about men in relationship with their wives or their girlfriends. What do you see as the primary role? We talked about provision. We talked about having your cup full enough so that you're not just a paycheck. Well, what does that look like? Give us a visual of what that is for you in your mind.
Are you just talking about like securing like a strong relationship with your wife?
Yeah. Men often have such a hard time understanding and relating to the feminine. I've been on quite a journey myself where I've done a lot of training and conferences, et cetera, to better understand the masculine feminine dynamic. I've gone through my own relationship growth as well. And as I've come to better understand it, it's something that I think a lot of men still are trying to, women are hard to understand, from a male's perspective.
That jumps me into this. Like, number one, you have to be secure with yourself around women, right? Because if you're unsure about yourself, they're going to build off that. They're supposed to compliment us. And if we have nothing to be complimented on, it gets chaotic. So number one is like being secure with yourself. And then the second thing is having emotional control. You cannot have emotional immaturity around a species that runs off emotions. And that's a fact. Every time you react to a woman negatively in any light, you're adding jet fuel to an already, lit fire.
Yeah.
There's a saying is that women, they think in circles and we think in straight lines, right?
Yeah.
And we'll never understand why or how they think, like why they think like that and how they think. You'll never understand. If you want to be a perfect husband, learn how to read minds, but you can't. So you have to be able to communicate clearly with a woman. And the way to do that is by not being emotional, right? So many of us get emotionally disturbed and we react. Same thing with your kids, right? As a man, like stoicism, I love the stoic mindset and lifestyle. I love it because like what happens is when a man gets emotionally disturbed in any way, like our emotions come across very strong, by the way. And it's scary to women and your kids. As much as you are genuine and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to be like that. When you get angry, a woman becomes afraid of that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And then also when we get really like sad or stressed out, like they can't be there to help you because you transfer that energy onto them. And then because they're emotional creatures, they just absorb it and then they become it. Right.
Can I challenge that for I want to push back on that just a little bit, because I do think that there is, I see some men take on this idea of stoicism and become completely nothing can faze me. I'm this emotionless, quote unquote, rock. And I have found that can be counterproductive. And to me, just to tweak a little bit what you're saying is not that I think what you're talking about is unglued emotion. Whereas intentional emotion coming from a grounded place, the feminine can feel that groundedness. So you can bring a level of passion. You can bring a level, like imagine the movie Braveheart, where he's riding in front of the troops and not expressing any emotion. There is a powerful place for emotion to reside. We are human beings, men are. We do feel emotions. And I think what you're talking about is really unglued emotions when they're out of control.
Yeah, I'm talking about definitely only on negative emotions.
Yeah, anger. A lot of men deal with a lot of anger suppression, and then it comes out, and it can be very scary.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like shame. I think in self-doubt, like we act on it. We just let it become a part, like we let it overwhelm us. Mm-hmm. And then it ruins our days. Like when a man gets angry, he can't just snap out of it. So what I like to teach people is like when you start to feel a negative emotion, that's when you have to decide, am I going to react to this or am I going to do something to change the state of my heart and my mind? Mm-hmm. Right. So one of the things I like to say is that your emotions are real, but they're not reality until you react to them. Once you react to a negative emotion, it becomes your reality. And then now there's consequences. Mm-hmm. Right. And I will say this, like personally, when a man in this world today, when a man reacts negatively to what's inside of his head, there can be major consequences, especially if you're not necessarily with the right woman or a woman that is secure with herself.
I think there's certainly some men who have dealt with some really nasty trauma that they haven't addressed yet. And so that anger continues to, it's like a volcano, and it continues to come out. Unfortunately, a lot of times against their wife, against their children, against themselves. They're really hard on themselves. And so I do feel that there's a place for needing to expel that anger, because that pent up anger is oftentimes it's the unmet need of that wounded child that dealt with the trauma, trying to find some place to,
Power.
to be seen and heard, right?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before. And so if you do, I'm just taking a little bit of a tangent here, just for those men who are in that place. You really do need something that, like Eric is offering here, with a brotherhood, in my mind, the best place to expel that is in brotherhood, with other men who understand the anger, who understand the isolation, who understand tough love. And so you have a place to expel it, and then you can have that accountability, like you've been talking about, and the love. Like anger is a normal emotion. And that's one of the things I try to teach my kids is like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated, but let's come to it from a place of authenticity. Let's come to it from a place of groundedness. Why are you angry? Tell me what's going on. You have an outlet. I'm wanting to hear you. And I think that's something that women are seeking too. And sometimes they will, you might have heard this before, the shit test, right? Where they're trying to almost compel some type of emotion, even if it's negative ones. Women are very, very, very adept at pushing certain buttons in order to get a certain reaction. And I've seen some men try to stay in that stoicism when she's trying to connect to, is there anybody there? Do you feel anything at all? Can I do this to you? And get a reaction? Oh, no. What about this? Well, what about this? And it creates this dynamic where she's throwing bigger and bigger shit tests, and he's trying to stay in his stoicism. And so I want to remind guys, just on that one little caveat, I hear what you're saying and it's important. I just want to make sure that people do understand too, that there is a time to say, hey, knock it off, that you get to acknowledge the frustration within you, but do it from a place of authenticity. Do it before you get to the bursting point, because that's not healthy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Here's the thing. You got to know who you're with too.
Yeah.
You got to know who you are. That's that security. You also have to know who you're with. Like, a lot of people are traumatized, and a lot of men and women out there have grown up with, a father that didn't want to hear them out, didn't want them to process their emotions, didn't want to hear it, kind of thing, go to your room. And so there's a lot of people that are coming in together as relationships that just trigger each other, and they don't know. The fact is like, it's important that in every individual as a adult finds a way to understand who they are at their core, how they operate, and why they operate in ways that brings them a result that they don't necessarily like, right? Like, why do I get angry? Why do I use drugs when, you know what I mean? Albert Einstein said the same brain, the same mind that creates a problem isn't the same mind that can fix it. Right? That brain either has to adapt and learn from other brains, or it has to ask for outside help to come in to solve that problem. And I love that, because, and this is what men don't do, is they isolate, they don't talk about their feelings. And so they just keep staying in this cycle that repeats relationship after relationship, day after day. And they get left to a place where they actually are in isolation. They're divorced, they get fired, right? So it's important to go out and seek brotherhood. I think brotherhood is the most important thing for men, because when you tell your story or you explain what's going on in your life, what you're fixing, you will realize like 95% of men are going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And 5% have solved it, and they have the answers for you. You know what I mean? But you got to be in a place that it's okay to talk about those things, because I'm going to tell you what, like, not everywhere is a safe place to tell your feelings. I'll be real about that. As a man, Yes, it's okay to express yourself. Yes, it's okay to be vulnerable. But if you do tell it to the wrong person, there's a high chance that it could be used against you. That's just a fact. This is a place you can come and talk about your stuff. Right?
A lot of men, they get confused by the messages that they're hearing in society. On the one hand, it's suck it up, have all the answers, don't show any kinks in your armor, right? Have all the answers. And yet on the other hand, they're also hearing this message of like, you need to express yourself. You need to process your emotions. You need to, and I think the mistake that a lot of men make is that they do go to the women in their lives and almost like a boy to a mother, which that would be an appropriate place to say, I'm hurting, mom, I'm struggling, or whatever. If you're a boy, if you're a man and you go to your wife and you do that, the metaphor that I share with the men that I work with is to say, it's like, how would you like to be on the battlefield? And bullets are flying overhead. Your buddy just got shot in the face next to you, bleeding out. And you turn to your commander and he goes, I just want to tell you, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm really struggling. Exactly. It's like, that's not the place, dude. Like, yes. And I don't want to ever hear that from you, bro. Like, go handle your shit and come back.
Exactly.
That's the metaphor that men need to know is like, go to the brotherhood, reach out to someone like Eric, handle that shit so that you can come back and be the leader that you are.
100%.
Yeah.
Some women you can tell them. There's probably a small percentage of women you could be like, I'm scared and I don't think we're going to pay the bills this month. And she'll be like, I got this. She might have
the power of the woman, the power of the feminine in that moment to me in the highest level is to remind him of who he is. Right. I have seen some beautiful, if you want to call it queen energy or just the mature feminine who can understand that there are times where her masculine, her king, is struggling. Yeah. And he has a deep enough relationship and respect of her where he can come to her and say, I lick his wounds a little bit and tail between his legs, like, I'm really help me. And they have that bond. Yes. But that takes a lot, man, to get to that level. Yeah.
And you got to know who you are. You got to understand your identity, and so does your wife. I would say, we're humans and we're flawed, and we all need our own support in a community outside of the marriage. I believe that God needs to be the center of your marriage. Otherwise, it's never going to work, because where God isn't, the devil is. That's a fact. I believe that health is a very important aspect of relationships. You both are healthy, and you're actively working on your developing yourself as people, as individuals. And as a couple. I believe that, alcohol and drugs should stay out of a marriage because they cause more problems than anything else. And yeah, man, I believe like that's it. It's simple. Like your mental, your emotional, your physical, and your spiritual health as a team, but also as individuals, because one person is unhealthy and the other person's constantly working on himself. They're going to be unbalanced, right? It says that God says to be equally yoked. And I know he's speaking of the spirit, but it's true to be said with health, physical health, emotional and mental health as well. If one person is unequally yoked, then the other person is going to be carrying the weight, and that's going to feel unfair. And that's when we start hearing the complaints of men saying, I feel like I'm doing everything and she doesn't care. And then it's like, if you keep doing everything, she's going to stay there, and now there's just this fat, unbalanced, marriage, which almost always ends in divorce.
Yes, it does.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.